Welcome to Monk's Temple. As you settle into your space tonight, wherever you are, whatever hour finds you, let the day gently soften around you. There's no need to go anywhere, to achieve anything. Simply rest here, listening. Feel the weight of your body being held, the gentle tide of your breath moving in and out. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Feel free to share in the comments. It's a beautiful reminder that we are a quiet community of seekers, resting together across distances and time zones. We often imagine that wisdom arrives slowly, like the gradual filling of a vessel. We believe understanding is built piece by piece over years, through study and experience. And sometimes, this is true. But there is another kind of knowing. A sudden, clear seeing that arrives without warning, like a lightning flash that illuminates a landscape you've been walking through all your life. This is what we call sudden awakening. It cannot be scheduled, forced, or manufactured. It arrives in its own time, often when we have finally released our tight grip on seeking it. Tonight, we'll explore this profound mystery not through lectures, but through stories, reflections, and quiet spaces where your own understanding can stir. There is no test here, no map you must follow. Simply listen, and let these words find their own way into the silent spaces within you. Let's begin by settling more deeply. Feel the surface beneath you, solid and supportive. Notice where your body makes contact, your back, your legs, your arms. Allow any tension you find there to soften, to melt into the support below. Bring your attention to your breath. Don't try to change it. Just observe its natural rhythm. The cool air entering, the warm air leaving. There's nothing you need to figure out right now. Nothing you need to remember or accomplish. Just rest. This resting is itself a kind of practice, a practice of allowing. Imagine a seed. It's small, dry, seemingly lifeless. You plant it in dark soil. For weeks, nothing visible happens. But beneath the surface, an extraordinary transformation is underway. The seed absorbs moisture, its shell softens and cracks. A tiny root, called a radicle, reaches downward, drawn by gravity. A shoot, called a plumule, strains upward, drawn by light it has never seen. Cellular division occurs at a miraculous pace. Only when the first green leaves finally push through the soil does the process become visible. That emergence seems sudden, but it was the final step in a long, hidden journey. Sudden awakening follows a similar pattern. The moment of insight, the aha, feels instantaneous. It's as if a veil has been lifted, a door opened. But the readiness for that moment has been developing all along, through the entirety of your life's experience. Every joy, every heartbreak, every moment of confusion, every instant of quiet attention, all of it has been part of the ripening. The struggles you thought were obstacles were actually shaping the container. The patience you learned in waiting was preparing the ground. This reveals what might seem like a beautiful contradiction. We must make effort, yet effort alone cannot produce awakening. Think of it like this: a farmer must till the soil, plant the seed, water it, and protect it from weeds. This is the effort, the sincere practice of meditation, self-inquiry, kindness, presence. But the farmer cannot stand over the seed and command it to grow. They cannot pull the sprout upward. The growth itself is a mysterious force, a kind of intelligence within life that operates on its own schedule. Our job is to create the conditions, then to step back and trust. Modern cognitive science speaks of the incubation period in creative problem solving. When you're stuck on a difficult problem, whether it's mathematical, artistic, or personal, the solution often arrives not through more frantic effort, but when you stop trying. You take a walk, take a shower, sleep on it. Your conscious mind rests, but your subconscious continues to work, making connections in the background. The eureka moment arrives as a gift, often when you're engaged in something completely unrelated. It feels sudden, but it was preceded by invisible preparation. Awakening operates in a similar space. Our conscious striving, our meditation practices, our reading, our longing for peace, prepares the mental and emotional ground. It clears away the weeds of distraction and habitual thinking. But the shift into a new way of seeing, the falling away of the separate self, often comes in a moment of surrender, of exhaustion, of simple ordinary presence when the seeker finally takes a rest. This is the essential paradox. We cannot reach awakening without sincere effort, yet awakening always arrives as a moment of grace, beyond effort. We are like surfers preparing for a wave. We train, we study the ocean, we position ourselves carefully. But when the wave comes, we must stop paddling and let its power carry us. All our preparation was necessary, but the ride itself is given. In the ancient city of Prague, where the astronomical clock has marked time for 6 centuries, there lived a master clockmaker named Joseph. His family had maintained the great clock for generations. Joseph knew every gear, every weight, every intricately painted figure that emerged on the hour. His entire identity was built on precision, on keeping the magnificent machine running perfectly. Each day, he would climb the tower, check the mechanisms, make minute adjustments. The clock's reliability was his pride. But as he grew older, a subtle unease grew within him. He began to notice that while he could measure time with exquisite accuracy, he felt increasingly disconnected from time itself. His life was a series of measured intervals, but where was the timeless? One particularly harsh winter, a historic cold snap seized the city. Temperatures plummeted so drastically that the great clock's mechanism, a complex system of irons and brass, seized up completely. For the first time in living memory, the clock fell silent. The famous procession of the apostles did not appear. The bell did not toll. The city felt strangely unmoored. Joseph worked for days in the frozen tower, his fingers numb, applying warmth, special oils, gentle pressure. Nothing worked. The great machine, his life's purpose, was stubbornly still. On the third night, exhausted and defeated, he simply sat on the stone floor of the tower, his tools beside him. He had done everything he knew how to do. In that exhaustion, in the profound silence of the stalled clock, he stopped trying. He just sat. He listened to the wind whistling through the tower's stone crevices. He watched the moonlight cast moving shadows through the motionless gears. And as he sat there, not as a clockmaker fixing a problem, but simply as a man in a tower in the middle of the night, something shifted. He realized he had been serving the measurement of time, but had forgotten to experience its presence. The silent clock was not a broken thing, it was, in that moment, a perfect expression of stillness, a different kind of time altogether. The relentless forward tick-tock had ceased, and in its place was an expansive, eternal now. When the cold finally broke and the mechanism, with a gentle nudge, began to move again, Joseph returned to his maintenance with a different spirit. He still kept the clock running with impeccable care, but now he would often pause, not to check its accuracy, but to simply witness its beautiful, intricate dance, a dance of which he was now a conscious part, not just a manager. He had discovered that time wasn't just in the clock. It was also in the silence between its ticks, and in the awareness that could hold both movement and stillness. His awakening came not through perfecting the mechanism, but through its failure. When his role as the expert fixer fell away, he encountered the timeless reality that the clock could only ever point to. Your presence in this quiet space is a gift. If these stories and teachings are helping you find a moment of peace, consider subscribing to Monk's Temple. Your subscription is like adding a candle to this digital sanctuary. It helps keep the space warm and illuminated for all who seek rest. It's a simple way to support this community of gentle listening. Let your awareness soften further now, like a gentle mist settling over a quiet lake. Often, we embark on grand quests for awakening. We imagine we must travel to distant monasteries, sit with famous gurus, or achieve special states of consciousness. We look for the extraordinary, the dramatic, the life-altering revelation. But what if the doorway we seek isn't in some far-off place? What if it's right here, hidden in the plain sight of your daily life, in the steam curling from your morning tea, in the weight of a grocery bag in your hand, in the sound of a key turning in a lock? Zen masters have always pointed to this truth with a simplicity that can frustrate the seeking mind. When a student would ask, "What is enlightenment?" a master might respond, "Have you eaten your rice? Then wash your bowl." Or, "The oak tree in the garden." These aren't evasive riddles. They are the most direct instructions possible. They point to a fundamental reality: the sacred is not separate from the ordinary, it is the ordinary, perceived with complete attention. The transcendent doesn't float above daily life, it shines through it when the filter of our inattention is removed. When you wash a dish with your full presence, feeling the warmth of the water, seeing the play of light on soap bubbles, hearing the clink of ceramic, you aren't just performing a chore. You are meeting reality directly, without the intermediary of thought. In that direct meeting, the activity itself becomes luminous, complete, and strangely fulfilling. Neuroscience offers a fascinating parallel. Research using fMRI scanners shows that when our minds are wandering, rehashing the past or worrying about the future, the brain's default mode network is highly active. This is associated with self-referential thinking and, often, lower reported happiness. However, when we are fully engaged in a task, present in the moment, this network quietens. Different regions light up, regions associated with sensory processing and direct experience. The brain, in a sense, stops telling stories about experience and simply has the experience. This shift out of narrative and into presence is the neurological correlate of what spiritual traditions point to. Peace is found not in changing what we do, but in changing how we are with what we do. This teaching invites a radical reorientation. You don't need to change your life to find awakening. You don't need a different job, a different house, or different relationships. Awakening asks you to change your relationship to your life, to meet it with open eyes and an undivided heart. The doorway isn't somewhere else. It's in this breath. It's in the next thing your hand reaches for. The challenge is not to find a special state, but to recognize that every state, when met with awareness, is already sacred. In a small boulangerie on the left bank of Paris, a woman named Colette baked bread. She had learned from her grandmother, and her hands carried generations of knowledge. For 20 years, her routine was unchanging. Wake before dawn, mix the dough, knead, let it rise, shape the loaves, fire the ancient oven. Her sourdough michi was famous. People lined up for its perfect crust and airy, tangy crumb. But for Colette, the magic had faded. The baking had become a series of automatic steps. Her body performed while her mind wandered, to unpaid bills, to an argument with her sister, to a vague longing for a life that felt more meaningful. The dough beneath her hands was just a substance to be processed. The smell of baking bread was just a signal that the timer was nearly up. One bitterly cold February morning, exhausted from a sleepless night, she was shaping the final batches. Her mind, for once, was too tired to wander. It was blank, a quiet hum of fatigue. As she scored the top of a large boule with her lame, she didn't think about the technique. She simply felt the blade's sharpness, the slight resistance of the taut dough skin. She placed it in the oven and, instead of rushing to the next task, she stood and watched through the small, sooty window. She saw the heat shimmer. She saw the dough, pale and soft, begin its transformation. It swelled, a living thing. The crust blushed from pale gold to deep amber, and cracks formed along her scored lines, the gears, baker's prize. In her tired, wordless state, she wasn't Colette the baker making bread. She was awareness, witnessing a miracle of alchemy. Flour, water, salt, and wild yeast becoming sustenance, becoming beauty, becoming an offering. When she pulled the loaf out and tapped its bottom, hearing the perfect hollow sound, she didn't feel pride. She felt reverence. She broke off the end crust, still too hot to eat properly, and breathed in its scent. It wasn't just the smell of bread. It was the smell of earth, the grain, of rain, the water, of time, the fermentation, of fire, the oven, of her own care. In that moment, the boundary between her and the bread, between the maker and the maid, dissolved. She was part of a timeless cycle of creation. The rest of her day unfolded as usual. But everything was different. Kneading was no longer a chore, it was a conversation with gluten and gravity. Serving a customer was no longer a transaction, it was the sharing of this tangible mystery. She hadn't changed a single external thing about her life. But she had walked through the doorway that had always been there, hidden in the heat of her own oven. In the vast, watery labyrinth of the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, an old man named Min had spent 50 years piloting a small, wooden ferry. His boat connected isolated villages to the main river channels. His world was the brown water, the ever-changing sky, the calls of water birds, and the rhythm of his pole pushing against the riverbed. To outsiders, it seemed a monotonous life. The same route, day after day, year after year. Travelers would board his boat, their minds already at their destination, barely noticing the man who guided them. Min rarely spoke. He stood at the stern, his eyes reading the water's flow, his hands moving the pole with unconscious grace. One afternoon, a university student from Ho Chi Minh City was on board, frustrated by the slow pace. "Doesn't this bore you?" he asked Min. "Going back and forth, seeing the same things every day. Don't you wish you could travel, see the world?" Min was silent for a long moment, his gaze on a kingfisher diving into the water. Then he said softly, "The world comes to me." He pointed with his chin. "Look. The water is never the same. Yesterday it was high and swift from the rains. Today it is low and lazy. The light on it now is gold. In the morning, it was silver mist. The birds are different each trip. The faces of the people are different. The sound of my pole entering the mud is different." He met the student's eyes. "You see a routine. I see a universe changing with every breath." The student, struck by the answer, fell quiet. For the remainder of the crossing, he tried to see what Min saw. He noticed the dappled light through the mangrove leaves, the complex symphony of insect sounds, the gentle rocking of the boat that felt like a cradle. By the time they reached the other side, his agitation had melted into a deep, unfamiliar calm. Min's awakening wasn't a single event, it was his sustained way of being. He had long ago stopped seeing himself as separate from the river, his boat, his passengers. He was a flowing part of the flow. His mindfulness was so seamless it was invisible. He didn't practice presence, he was presence, moving through the landscape of his life. He needed no special meditation hall. His ferry, his pole, the ever-changing river, these were his temple, his practice, and his teacher. He demonstrated that enlightenment isn't about seeing new things, but about seeing the same things with utterly new eyes, eyes that are not separate from what they see. Let's rest here for a moment. Don't try to remember these stories. Let them go. Instead, bring this quality of attention to your own experience right now. What is the most ordinary sensation you can notice? The pressure of your headphones? The temperature of the air on your skin? The faint taste in your mouth? Pour your awareness into that simple sensation. Don't label it good or bad. Just meet it directly. In that meeting, the ordinary becomes intimate, vivid, and complete. This is the practice. Not adding something special, but subtracting the inattention that makes life seem commonplace. Let your awareness settle like a leaf coming to rest on still water. We've spoken of awakening in the ordinary. But sometimes, life doesn't offer us gentle moments of dishwashing or bread baking. Sometimes, it brings storms that sweep everything familiar away. Loss, illness, failure, grief, these are not the gentle doorways we might choose, but they can become the most powerful ones. When the structures of our life crumble, we are forced to look for a foundation that lies deeper than circumstance. We build our identities like beautiful sandcastles on the shore. I am a professional, a parent, a healthy person, a success. We decorate them with achievements and relationships. Then a wave comes, sometimes a small one, sometimes a tsunami, and the castle is gone. In that moment of devastation, a terrible and precious question arises: if I am not the sandcastle, what am I? This is the teaching of the ground beneath the ground. When everything you've built your sense of self upon is washed away, what remains? Not your roles, not your possessions, not your abilities, not even your memories. What remains is the awareness that witnesses the loss. The silent, conscious space in which the drama of my life falling apart is unfolding. This awareness is not affected by the storm. It is the sky, not the weather. Discovering this as your true nature is an awakening forged in fire. Modern therapeutic modalities, like acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, work with a similar principle. They call it self as context, the observant self that is distinct from your thoughts, feelings, and roles. When you can contact this perspective, you can hold great pain without being destroyed by it. You realize, I am having the experience of grief rather than, I am grief. That tiny shift in perspective creates a world of space around suffering. This doesn't mean the pain isn't real or shouldn't be honored. It means you are larger than your pain. You are the canvas, not the paint. And no matter how dark the paint, the canvas remains untouched, ready to hold whatever comes next. In Warsaw, Poland, Karina was hailed as a prodigy. Her hands, which could fly across the keys with breathtaking speed and emotion, were her identity. She was the pianist. At 28, she was at the peak of her career, her future a shining path of concert halls and recording studios. Then, she began to notice a persistent, unexplained weakness in her right fourth finger. It grew worse. Specialists delivered the diagnosis, focal dystonia, a neurological condition where the brain sends incorrect signals to the muscles, causing involuntary cramping and curling. For a pianist, it is often a career-ending sentence. Terror, then furious denial, set in. She tried everything, specialists across Europe, physical therapy, bizarre contraptions, sheer force of will. She would sit at the piano for hours, her right hand seizing in pain, tears of frustration mixing with the sweat on the keys. The more she fought, the tighter the dystonic grip became. After 2 years of this war with her own body, she collapsed. One night, she simply lay on the floor of her studio, empty of fight, empty of hope. The grand piano loomed over her like a monument to a dead self. In that emptiness, a strange quiet descended. She wasn't Karina the failed pianist anymore. She was just a woman, lying on a wooden floor, breathing. The next day, she didn't go to the piano. She went for a walk in the Lazienki Park. She heard a street musician playing a simple folk melody on a violin. She stopped and listened, not with a critic's ear, but with her whole being. The music entered her not through ambition or comparison, but through pure reception. She felt it in her chest, in her tear ducts. She realized that for her entire life, she had been a conduit for music, but she had never fully been its recipient. She never played a sonata again. But she began to teach. And she taught in a revolutionary way. She had her students close their eyes and feel the vibration of the piano through the floor. She taught them to play single notes and listen to the sound until it dissolved into silence. She focused on the feeling of the music, the intention behind it, rather than just the technical execution. Her students began winning competitions for their uncommon depth of expression. One former student, now a famous performer, said in an interview, "Karina taught me that music doesn't live in the fingers. It lives in the silence between the notes, and in the heart that listens." She lost her technique and found the soul of music. Karina's awakening came through the loss of the very instrument of her identity. When the pianist was taken, she discovered the listener, and that listener was indestructible. In the heart of Silicon Valley, Arjun's tech startup was his universe. For 7 years, he lived on venture capital dreams and relentless hustle. He was Arjun, CEO of NextGen AI. His worth was his valuation, his identity woven into code and pitch decks. They were on the cusp of a breakthrough, and then a rival company released an identical product, built on stolen IP. A lawsuit ensued, draining resources. Key engineers left. Funding dried up. The day the final investor pulled out, Arjun sat alone in the sleek, now empty office. The furniture was gone, the whiteboards wiped clean. The silence was absolute. The story of Arjun, the successful founder, had reached its final chapter, and the last page was blank. For weeks, he moved through his spacious apartment like a ghost. He tried to plot a comeback, but his mind was a fog of shame and panic. One morning, utterly numb, he made a cup of tea and sat on his balcony. He watched a hummingbird hover at a feeder, its wings a blur of impossible speed, its body perfectly still. He wasn't thinking about market share or algorithms. He was just watching a bird. And in that simple act of pure attention, the tight knot of his identity loosened. The thought arose, clear and calm, that is happening. The feeling of panic is happening. The memory of failure is happening. But what is the I that is aware of all this happening? It was not an intellectual question. It was a turning of attention back upon itself. He wasn't Arjun the failure in that moment. He was the space in which the experience of failure was occurring. And that space was peaceful. It was untouched by the drama. This didn't magically fix his life. He still had debts. He still had to find a new path. But the ground had shifted. He was no longer standing on the crumbling cliff of his startup's success. He had found the solid ground of awareness itself. From that place, he began again, not with a desperate hunger to prove himself, but with a quieter, more genuine curiosity. He became a mentor to other founders, not teaching them how to avoid failure, but how to meet it without losing themselves. His greatest offering came from what he had lost. Let's pause here. This teaching is profound and can be challenging. It's not about bypassing grief or pretending loss doesn't matter. It's about discovering what you are that cannot be lost. Feel into your own experience. Can you sense the difference between a thought or emotion you're having, and the awareness that knows you're having it? That aware space is your true ground. It is always here, beneath every joy, every sorrow. Rest in that knowing for a few breaths. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds it. Let your breath deepen now, like a tide washing gently over smooth stones. We have explored how awakening can come through loss, when our constructed worlds fall away. But what about the long stretches of ordinary time in between? The days, months, years where nothing seems to happen, where we practice and yet feel no closer to our goal. This brings us to one of the most subtle and essential teachings, the relationship between effort and grace, between doing and allowing. We live in a culture that worships striving. We believe if we just work harder, push more, do more, we will achieve our desired result. We apply this mindset to spirituality. If I meditate longer, study more texts, attend more retreats, then I will get enlightenment. But awakening does not operate like a linear transaction. You cannot purchase it with effort coins. This creates immense frustration. We feel we are failing at failing, striving for non-striving. The teaching here is of active patience, or what we might call effortless effort. Imagine a gardener. They do not stand over a seed shouting, "Grow." They perform certain actions. They till the soil, plant at the right depth, water, weed, and ensure sunlight. This is their effort, intelligent, attentive, consistent. But then, they wait. They do not dig up the seed daily to check on its progress. They trust the intelligence within the seed and the laws of nature. Their work is active, but their attitude is patient, receptive, trusting. Our spiritual practice is the gardener's work. Meditation, mindfulness, self-inquiry, acts of kindness, these are the tilling, the watering, the weeding. They are necessary. They create the conditions. But the actual shift in consciousness, the flowering of insight, is like the growth of the plant. It happens according to its own organic timing. We cannot force it. Our job is to do our part faithfully, and then to release our anxious grip on the outcome. To practice with full engagement while holding the results lightly. In Chinese philosophy, this is the principle of Wu Wei, often translated as effortless action or action through non-action. It is the skill of the expert archer who, after years of training, releases the bowstring without conscious thought. It is the painter whose brush moves as if guided by the painting itself. The effort was in the training, the mastery is in the surrender of a separate, controlling self during the action. In the highlands of Oaxaca, Mexico, an indigenous Zapotec woman named Elena was a master weaver. Her family had woven intricate tapes, rugs, on wooden looms for generations, their patterns telling ancient stories. Elena was known for her speed and precision. She would conceive a complex pattern in her mind and then force her hands and the threads to obey her mental image. She decided to create her masterpiece, a rug depicting the entire cosmovision of her people, the gods, the earth, the sky, the underworld. She dyed the wool with natural pigments, set up her largest loom, and began. But the design was so complex that she constantly made errors. A thread of the wrong color here, a missed intersection there. She would unravel hours of work, her frustration growing. The tighter she tried to control the process, the more the thread seemed to rebel, tangling and breaking. After 6 months, the loom held only a chaotic, tense mess. She was on the verge of abandoning it. One afternoon, overwhelmed, she walked away from the loom and into the family's small cornfield. She sat in the dirt, her back against a stone, and cried. When her tears were spent, she just watched the clouds. She noticed how they formed and dissolved without effort. She saw a spider weaving a web between 2 corn stalks, a perfect, geometric pattern emerging from the creature's body without any visible plan. A deep exhaustion settled into her, and with it, a letting go. She returned to the loom not as a master enforcing her will, but as an empty vessel. She didn't think about the grand pattern. She simply picked up the shuttle. Her hands moved, but she wasn't directing them. She watched as if the weaving were happening through her. The colors blended in ways she hadn't planned. New, simpler patterns emerged from the mistakes, patterns that felt more alive, more truthful than her original rigid design. When the rug was finished months later, it was not the detailed cosmovision she had intended. It was something else. A flowing, abstract representation of light moving through clouds, of roots in earth, of connection itself. The elders who saw it were silent, Then one spoke, "This does not tell the old story. It is the feeling of the story." Elena had discovered that true artistry isn't about forcing a preconceived idea into form, it's about becoming a clear channel through which life can express itself. Her effort had prepared her skill, but the masterpiece emerged only when effort turned into surrender. Dr. Lin was a climate scientist on a year-long expedition at a research station in Svalbard, Norway, far above the Arctic Circle. Her mission was to collect data on ice core samples to model climate change. She worked with fierce urgency, her mind always on the ticking clock of planetary crisis. Every day was scheduled: drill, log, analyze, report. She saw the sublime Arctic landscape, the auroras, the midnight sun, the immense silence, only as a backdrop to her urgent task. Halfway through the expedition, a brutal polar storm confined the team to the station for 8 straight days. The generators hummed, the windows were opaque with driven snow. With her meticulous routine shattered, Lin first felt anxious, then restless, then finally, a deep boredom. There was nothing to do. On the 5th day, for lack of anything else, she sat by a small window that had partially cleared. She just watched the snow. She watched it for an hour. Her analytical mind, deprived of data to process, slowly quieted. She began to feel the storm, not as a meteorological event, but as a presence. A vast, powerful, alive presence. She felt the station itself, a tiny bubble of warmth holding against the immense cold. She felt her own heartbeat, slow and steady in the stillness. In that extended, unplanned pause, a profound understanding settled into her, not as a thought, but as a bodily knowing. She was not separate from what she was studying. Her breath was part of the atmosphere. Her body's warmth was part of the planet's energy system. The urgency of her mission had created a false division between herself, the savior, and the planet, the patient. In the stillness, that division dissolved. When the storm cleared and she returned to her ice cores, her work was transformed. She was no longer just extracting data from passive matter. She was in conversation with ancient climate, listening to the stories trapped in the ice. Her subsequent papers were noted not just for their data, but for their poetic, systemic insight. She had learned that the most crucial data sometimes comes not from furious doing, but from receptive being. The storm had forced upon her the practice of Wu Wei, of allowing understanding to come, rather than chasing it. Let this be an invitation to you. Feel into your own life. Where are you striving, forcing, pushing against the river? Can you sense the fatigue of that effort? Now, imagine for a moment applying the principle of active patience. What would it feel like to engage fully with your work, your relationships, your practice, but to do so with open hands, releasing the need for a specific outcome? The effort remains, but the striving, the anxious tension, can fall away. Try it now with your breath. Breathe naturally, but with full attention. That's effort. Now, release any goal for how the breath should be. That's surrender. Rest in this dance. As we settle deeper into this shared space, let's turn our attention to a realm where our spiritual ideals often meet their most potent test, our relationships with others. It's one thing to feel peace in solitude, quite another to maintain that peace when faced with a difficult person, a loved one's pain, or our own triggered reactions. Relationships are not distractions from the path, they are the very crucible in which awakening is forged and proven real. We often imagine the awakened being as a solitary sage on a mountaintop. But true awakening must come down the mountain. It must be able to hold the messiness of human connection without losing its center. In fact, our interactions with others act as a perfect mirror, showing us exactly where we are still identified with our ego, where we are still defending, blaming, or needing validation. Every moment of irritation is a pointer. Every flare of jealousy is a teacher. Every act of unconditional kindness is the awakening itself in action. The teaching here is about awakening as relational clarity. It's the realization that there is no separate me relating to a separate you. In the deepest sense, relationship is the interplay of consciousness with itself. When you see this, compassion is not something you generate, it's what you are. Boundaries remain healthy and necessary, but they exist within a field of non-separateness. You can say no with the same love with which you say yes, because the action comes from clarity, not from reaction. Modern attachment theory and interpersonal neurobiology echo this. Our brains are wired for connection, our nervous systems regulate in concert with others. Our sense of a separate, solid self is, in part, a story constructed through our early relationships. Healing and awakening often involve rewiring these patterns, moving from reactive, defended relating to responsive, present relating. It's a movement from me against you to us in this together, and ultimately to the recognition of one shared being experiencing itself through multiple forms. In the gastronomic capital of Lyon, France, two chefs, Antoine and Bernard, owned restaurants directly across the narrow cobblestone street from each other. For 20 years, they were bitter rivals. Each saw the other's success as a personal insult. They stole suppliers, poached staff, and sent friends to write bad reviews for the other. Their feud was legendary, a toxic part of the local lore. Their identities were built on being not the other. Antoine was the traditionalist, Bernard the innovator, and each defined himself in opposition. Then, a food critic from a global publication came to town, promising a feature that would crown one of them as the chef of Lyon. The tension reached a fever pitch. The night before the critic's visit, Antoine, checking his kitchen one last time, smelled smoke. He rushed outside to see flames licking the windows of Bernard's restaurant. Without a thought, he shouted for his own staff, grabbed fire extinguishers, and they all raced across the street. For the next chaotic hour, there were no rivals. There were just men fighting a common enemy, the fire. They worked shoulder to shoulder, passing buckets, shouting directions. When the fire brigade arrived and doused the last embers, the two chefs stood in the wet, smoky street, covered in soot, staring at the damaged facade of Bernard's life work. Bernard, his voice choked, could only say, "Why did you help?" Antoine, exhausted, looked at him and said the truth that emerged in the crisis. It was the right thing to do. In that moment, the story of rival evaporated. They saw each other not as caricatures, but as human beings, fragile, passionate, dedicated. The critic's visit was cancelled. In the following weeks, Antoine let Bernard use his own kitchen to fulfill catering orders while his was repaired. Bernard, in turn, shared a secret supplier of rare truffles. They never became best friends. But the war was over. They discovered that their separate, fortified identities had been a prison. The fire burned down not just a wall, but the illusion of separation that had fueled their feud. Their awakening was relational. They saw the other as another version of themselves, a man who loved food, feared failure, and cared deeply about his craft. From that day, their rivalry became a respectful, even fruitful, dialogue. The mirror of conflict had finally shown them their shared reflection. In Mumbai, Leela was a renowned grief counselor. She had built her career on knowing what to say, on having the right technique, the perfect compassionate phrase. She helped hundreds navigate loss, and she took pride in her professional detachment, her ability to hold space without being swept away by the client's emotion. Then her own brother died suddenly. The ground fell out from under her world. When she returned to her practice after a month, the first client who sat before her was a woman who had also lost a brother. Leela opened her mouth to begin her usual gentle protocol, and nothing came out. All her techniques, her scripts, her professional boundaries felt like cardboard cutouts. She was face to face with raw, mirroring grief, and her expertise was useless. She sat in silence for a long moment. Then, instead of counseling, she simply said, her voice raw, "My brother died last month. I don't know what to say either." The client looked up, shocked out of her own isolation. The two women, counselor and client, disappeared. In their place were two humans swimming in the same ocean of sorrow. They cried together. They sat in silence together. No one was fixing anyone. That session changed Leela's work forever. She didn't abandon her skills, but she stopped hiding behind them. She began to practice what she called companionship without agenda. She discovered that true healing presence wasn't about having the right answer from a place of separation, it was about the courage to meet the other person in the shared, vulnerable truth of the moment, without any division between healer and wounded. Her clients felt it immediately, a deeper, more real connection that allowed their grief to move naturally. Leela's awakening was the dissolution of the professional persona. She learned that the most therapeutic tool was not a technique, but authentic, undefended shared presence. Bring this understanding into your own awareness. Think of a relationship that challenges you, maybe a coworker, a family member, even a part of yourself you reject. Can you, just for a moment, drop the story of me versus them? Can you see their actions not as personal attacks, but as expressions of their own pain, fear, or conditioning? This isn't about excusing harmful behavior, it's about seeing it clearly, without adding your own reactive story on top. From that clear space, a response, which could be a boundary, a conversation, or silent understanding, can arise that is intelligent and compassionate, rather than defensive. Feel the difference. It's the difference between being caught in the reflection and being the clear mirror itself. Let your awareness descend now, like a gentle rain settling into the earth. We've explored the mind, relationships, and moments of crisis. But there is a temple of wisdom we carry with us every moment, one that speaks in a language older than thought, the body. We live so much in our heads, planning, analyzing, remembering, that we often forget the profound intelligence dwelling in our senses, our breath, our heartbeat. Sudden awakening is not only a mental event. It is very often a full-bodied knowing, a shift felt in the bones and the blood. The teaching here is about somatic awakening, the discovery that consciousness is not confined to the space behind your eyes. It permeates your entire being. Your body is not a vehicle for your mind, it is an expression of awareness itself. When you have a gut feeling, that's the body's intelligence. When tension melts from your shoulders in a moment of peace, that's awakening moving through your flesh. The body doesn't lie. It holds our history, our trauma, and our deepest truth. To awaken is to come home to the body completely, to listen to its whispers before they become screams. Modern science is now catching up with ancient wisdom. The field of somatic psychology and therapies like somatic experiencing work on the principle that trauma and stress are stored in the body's nervous system and tissues. Healing involves releasing this stored energy through bodily awareness, not just talking. Similarly, the interoceptive sense, your perception of the internal state of your body, is linked to emotional regulation and a sense of self. People with higher interoceptive awareness often report greater emotional clarity and presence. The body is a direct pathway to the present moment. You cannot feel your foot on the floor yesterday or tomorrow, only now. In the vibrant streets of Havana, Cuba, Sophia was a dancer of breathtaking passion. Her body was her instrument, speaking the language of sun and rumba with fiery precision. Her identity was movement. Then, a botched surgery on her knee left her with chronic nerve pain. The doctors said she might never dance without a severe limp again. For a year, Sophia was imprisoned in stillness. She watched others dance from her balcony, each step a needle in her heart. She fell into a depression so deep her body felt like a tomb. One sweltering afternoon, in her silent apartment, a memory surfaced, her grandmother, also a dancer, saying, "The dance is not in the steps, mi vida. It is in the listening." Out of sheer desperation, Sophia dragged a chair to the center of the room. She sat, closed her eyes, and decided not to try to move. Instead, she would listen. She listened to the pain in her knee. Not as an enemy, but as a sensation, a tight, electric buzz. She listened to her breath. She felt the air moving in and out, the slight expansion of her ribs. She noticed the humming of the old refrigerator, the distant sound of a trumpet from the street. And then, something miraculous happened. As she listened with her whole being, a subtle internal movement began. It wasn't her muscles moving. It was a sense of aliveness swirling within her stillness, a fluid, energetic sensation that flowed up her spine and out through the crown of her head. It was a dance of pure life force, with no steps, no form. Tears streamed down her face. She was dancing. Not for an audience, not with her legs, but with her awareness. The boundary between her body and the music of existence dissolved. From that day, her healing accelerated. She began to move again, not by forcing her knee, but by following this internal flow of sensation. Her dance changed. It became slower, more profound, more internally directed. People who saw her perform now said it was less about spectacle and more about a transmission of feeling. Sophia had discovered that the essence of dance was not external movement, but the awakened, listening presence within the body. Her injury hadn't ended her dance, it had revealed its true source. Deep in Germany's Black Forest, an old woodworker named Klaus practiced his craft. He built furniture not with power tools, but with hand tools passed down from his father. His workshop smelled of oak, walnut, and linseed oil. Klaus was a quiet man, and people said he listened to the wood. A young, ambitious designer from Berlin visited, wanting to commission a modern conference table. He brought rigid blueprints. Klaus looked at the plans, then at a beautiful slab of ash he had been seasoning. He ran his hand over the wood, feeling its grain, its knots, its subtle warp. This wood, he said slowly, does not want to be that table. It wants to be a long, low bench. It wants people to sit close to the ground, to feel solid. The designer was annoyed. I'm paying for a table. The wood doesn't want anything. It's material. Klaus simply nodded and declined the commission. The designer left, scoffing. Later, Klaus explained to his apprentice what he meant. It is not magic, he said. When you work wood with your hands for 50 years, you stop seeing it as an object. You feel its history. The years of rain and sun in its rings, the tension where a branch grew. Your hands learn to read its language of hardness and softness. To force a design against its nature is violence. It will fight you, crack, or remain dead. To follow its nature is collaboration. Then, the finished piece feels alive. It has Leben, life. He picked up a hand plane and demonstrated on a different board. His strokes were not mere cutting, they were a conversation. He would pause, feel the surface with his palm, adjust his angle. The awakening, he said, is when you stop being the master making a thing, and become the partnership between your awareness and the awareness in the material. The body knows this. The mind with its plans does not. Klaus's awakening was somatic, tactile. His wisdom lived in his calloused hands and his attentive posture. He knew truth through contact, not conception. His furniture was sought after not for its style, but for its inexplicable feeling of rightness, of belonging in a space. People said sitting on a Klaus bench made you feel grounded. He had become a bridge between the consciousness in the human form and the consciousness in the tree, and his work was the meeting place. Turn your attention to your own body now. Don't think about it. Feel it. Start with your hands. Can you feel the aliveness there, a subtle tingling, warmth, presence? Move your awareness to your feet. Feel the contact with the floor, the weight, the alive stillness. Now, let your attention expand to include your whole body, from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet, all at once. Feel it as a single field of sensation, vibrant and intelligent. This is not a body you own. This is awareness, taking the shape of sensation. Rest in this direct, bodily knowing. The body doesn't worry about enlightenment. It simply is. And in that simple being, it is already awake. Breathe into this wholeness. Let your awareness settle like dust motes in a sunbeam, present, weightless, held in a greater light. We've explored how awakening can bloom in the body and in relationship. Now, let's turn to a potent, often unwelcome catalyst: limitation. We typically see constraints, lack of time, resources, health, or freedom, as obstacles to the life we want, and thus to our spiritual growth. We think, if only I had more time to meditate, more space, more quiet, then I could really find peace. But what if the very walls we push against are not prison bars, but the supportive structure of the doorway itself? This is the teaching of awakening within constraint. It's the discovery that freedom is not the absence of limits, but the conscious, creative relationship with them. A river is most itself, most powerful and musical, when it flows within the constraints of its banks. Without banks, it becomes a formless flood. Our limitations, of time, ability, circumstance, provide the necessary friction against which our awareness can define itself, can become focused and bright. When we stop resisting the limitation and instead bring full presence to the space it creates, that space becomes sacred. There's a principle in art and design known as creative constraint. Artists know that a blank canvas with infinite possibilities can be paralyzing. But give them a limited palette, a specific size, a single theme, and creativity ignites. The constraint doesn't hinder expression, it channels it, gives it form and potency. Our spiritual life is no different. The perfect conditions for awakening are not spacious, endless, and easy. Often, they are precisely the tight, pressured, imperfect conditions of our actual lives, because they force us to stop seeking elsewhere and to awaken right here. In a high-security prison outside Oslo, Norway, a woman named Ingrid ran the small, sparse library. Her congregation were men serving long sentences, their worlds reduced to concrete, routine, and regret. Ingrid, a former academic, had initially seen her job as a humanitarian duty, bringing the light of literature into a dark place. She tried to start a meditation group. No one came. She recommended philosophical texts. They went unread. She felt frustrated, her ideals hitting the hard wall of reality. One day, a notoriously quiet inmate named Lars approached the desk. He didn't want a book. In halting words, he asked if she had any manuals on bird identification. The prison had a small, walled exercise yard where sparrows and the occasional crow landed. He had begun watching them. This simple, humble request shattered Ingrid's grand spiritual agenda. She found him a field guide. The next week, Lars returned, his eyes slightly brighter. He had seen a chaffinch, which wasn't in the book. Could she help him find it? Ingrid, using the prison's slow computer, printed out a picture. This became their ritual. Not meditation, not philosophy, but the meticulous, shared attention to the tiny wildlife that visited their shared cage. Through Lars, Ingrid's view of the prison transformed. She began to see it not as a place devoid of spirit, but as an intense concentration of it. The limitations were absolute, and within them, attention became diamond bright. A shaft of sunlight on the floor became an event. The taste of an apple was a universe. The hesitant trust of a man asking about a bird was a sacred communion. She stopped trying to import spirituality into the prison. She began to discover it there, in the raw, stripped-down reality. She started a noticing club, where inmates would share one precise thing they had observed that week. The pattern of rust on a pipe, the sound of rain on the roof at 2 a.m. It was a wild success. In the ultimate limitation, they were practicing the essence of mindfulness, pure, undemanding attention. Ingrid realized her own awakening. Freedom isn't the opposite of confinement, it's the quality of attention you bring to your experience, however confined. The prison walls, once hated, became the banks that made the river of their attention run deep and strong. In a tiny, 400-square-foot apartment in central Tokyo, Yumi was a new mother to twins. Her world, once filled with a career and city life, had collapsed into a relentless cycle of feedings, diaper changes, and sleepless nights. The apartment felt like a capsule, cluttered with baby gear. Time was no longer her own, it was sliced into 2-hour increments. She loved her children fiercely but felt a spiritual suffocation, a mourning for her old self and its freedoms. One desperate, rainy afternoon, both babies were finally napping at the same time. The silence was shocking. Yumi sat on the floor, too tired to even think. Her gaze fell on a single drop of water tracing a slow, meandering path down the windowpane. She followed it with her entire being. She had nowhere else to be, nothing else she could do. In that enforced stillness, watching that one drop, her sense of claustrophobia vanished. The drop wasn't confined, it was on a journey. The apartment wasn't a prison, it was a warm nest, a whole world for her children. The fragmented time wasn't an enemy, it was a series of perfect, self-contained moments, a nursing cuddle, a tiny hand grasping her finger, the smell of a baby's head. The limitation of her space and time had forced her awareness into a hyper-focused intensity. She couldn't have deep spiritual conversations or go on retreats, so her retreat was here, in the miraculous ordinary of a baby's breath, the texture of a blanket, the light changing on the wall. She began to practice what she called micro-satori, momentary awakenings within the constraint. While washing bottles, she would feel the warmth of the water completely. While rocking a baby, she would become the rocking. Her spiritual life didn't happen despite her motherhood. It became the very fabric of it. The limitation of her situation didn't block her path, it became the path, a narrow, focused beam of love and attention that cut through all abstraction. She discovered that the most profound freedom can be found not by expanding your territory, but by diving utterly deep into the territory you've been given. Consider your own life. What are the constraints you chafe against? A demanding job? Financial pressures? A health condition? Family responsibilities? Instead of seeing them as barriers to your peace, experiment for a moment. See them as the defined edges of your current canvas. Your spiritual task is not to escape the canvas, but to bring your most vibrant, present awareness to the painting you're making within these edges. The limitation defines the space in which your creativity, your awakening, can occur. Feel the pressure of a constraint you have. Now, relax your mental resistance to it. Just let it be a fact, like the bank of a river. Then, feel the quality of your awareness within that space. It can become very clear, very potent, very here. This is the alchemy of limitation, turning the lead of "I can't" into the gold of "I am" fully here. Let your awareness expand now, like a drop of ink dispersing in clear water. We've explored the human world of relationships, bodies, and limitations. Now, let us step outside, not to escape, but to remember our original home. Nature is not merely a backdrop for our spiritual dramas, it is one of the oldest and most silent teachers. In the wild, untouched places, the mind's chatter often falls away not through effort, but through a kind of absorption. The separate self, so solid indoors, can begin to feel porous, transparent, like mist among trees. This teaching is about ecological awakening, the recognition that you are not in nature, you are nature, conscious and aware. A tree does not strive to be a tree. A river does not struggle to flow. They simply express their nature completely. When we are in deep nature, we can remember this effortless being. The anxiety of becoming dissolves into the peace of belonging. The boundary between observer and observed softens. You don't look at a mountain, you feel the mountain in your chest. You don't hear a stream, your thoughts begin to flow with its same, uninterrupted clarity. Modern ecopsychology speaks of the biophilic hypothesis. That humans have an innate, genetic need to connect with nature, and that this connection is essential for mental and spiritual well-being. Studies show that time in forests, Shinrin-yoku or forest bathing in Japan, lowers cortisol, boosts immunity, and enhances mood. But beyond these physiological benefits lies a deeper, perceptual shift. In nature, we are removed from the human-made world of symbols, schedules, and status. We are returned to a reality that operates on older, slower, more intelligent rhythms. In that return, the constructed self can relax its grip, allowing a more fundamental identity to surface. Dr. Eris had spent her career modeling the collapse of giant stars into black holes. Her world was one of abstract mathematics, supercomputers, and conference rooms. She understood the universe through equations. She was brilliant, but carried a quiet despair. A feeling that in mapping the cosmos, she had lost all sense of wonder. It had all become a complex puzzle. To collect data, she traveled to the Atacama Desert in Chile, home to the world's most powerful telescopes. The air is so dry and the sky so clear there that the stars don't twinkle, they burn with hard, steady brilliance. One night, a power surge fried the delicate electronics of her telescope. With her instrument dead for the night, frustrated, she stepped outside the dome. She looked up. And she was obliterated. The Milky Way was not a smear of light, it was a torrent, a river of diamonds poured across the velvet black. The silence of the desert was total, a physical presence. In the face of this immensity, her equations, her titles, her carefully constructed identity as a knower, evaporated. She didn't think about supernovae. She didn't think at all. She fell to her knees in the sand, not in prayer, but in pure, wordless awe. For the first time, she wasn't studying the universe. She was being the universe, looking at itself. The separation between the observer and the cosmic spectacle collapsed. She wept, not from sadness, but from the shocking intimacy of it all, the realization that the carbon in her tears, the calcium in her bones, the iron in her blood, was forged in the heart of stars she was now gazing upon. She was not a visitor to the cosmos. She was its flowering. When she returned to her work, nothing had changed, and everything had. The equations were still beautiful, but they were now love letters to a mystery she had met directly, not blueprints for a machine she controlled. Her colleagues noticed a new depth in her, a humility that made her an even better scientist. She had received the most important data point not from the telescope, but from the desert night. The direct experience of being a conscious part of an unimaginably intelligent, creative, and vast whole. On the rugged Isle of Skye in Scotland, old Hamish had fished the same loch for 60 years. He knew every mood of the water, every secret of the trout. Tourists would sometimes ask him the secret to his consistent catch. He'd grunt and say, "I listen." They thought he meant to the water. He didn't. One misty morning, a young writer renting a cottage nearby followed him, hoping for wisdom. He watched Hamish not as a fisherman, but as a man in a landscape. Hamish didn't cast his line with frantic hope. He would stand still for 20 minutes at a time, his eyes not on the float, but on the mist curling over the pine-clad hills. He seemed to be breathing with the landscape itself. Finally, the writer approached. "What are you listening for, really?" Hamish looked at him with pale blue eyes that seemed to hold the loch's depth. "I'm not listening for anything. I'm listening until I'm no longer here. The fish, the water, the mist, my own heartbeat, it all becomes one sound. Then, when to cast the line, it's not a decision. It's like the loch itself moves my arm." He demonstrated. He stood, still as a heron. After a long silence, his arm drew back and cast the line in a smooth arc that landed with a perfect, gentle plink. Almost immediately, the line tightened. He landed a beautiful, silver trout. "The fish isn't caught by me," Hamish said, releasing it back into the water. "It's caught by the harmony. When I'm separate, trying, I catch nothing. When I disappear into the listening, the loch provides." For Hamish, fishing was not a sport or a livelihood, it was his lifelong meditation. His awakening was seamless, earned through decades of silent communion. He had dissolved into the ecosystem, becoming a conscious node within it. His wisdom was in his posture, in his patience, in his belonging. He didn't have spiritual insights, he was a spiritual insight, walking in boots caked with Scottish mud. Bring this understanding into your own awareness. You don't need a remote desert or a Scottish loch. Bring your attention to the most immediate piece of nature you can access, a houseplant, the sky through a window, the sound of rain, the feel of a breeze. Now, don't just look at it or hear it. Try to feel your way into its reality. Feel the plant's quiet struggle toward light. Feel the vastness the sky implies. Feel the rain's journey from cloud to earth. As you do this, notice what happens to the sense of you observing a separate it. The boundary may soften. You may feel less like an observer and more like a participant in a shared, intelligent field of life. This participatory feeling is the essence of ecological awakening. You are remembering that you belong here, as an integral part of the whole, not as a separate manager of it. Rest in this belonging. Let your awareness become as soft as twilight, where edges blur and certainty gives way to depth. We've explored how awakening can meet us in nature, in the body, in limitation. Now, let's turn to the very engine of our seeking, the thinking mind itself. We are conditioned to believe that to be wise is to know. We accumulate facts, opinions, beliefs, spiritual concepts. We build a fortress of knowing to protect ourselves from the discomfort of mystery. But what if the deepest wisdom is not found in the answers we hold, but in our capacity to rest, open and undefended, in the space of not knowing? This is the teaching of beginner's mind, Shoshin in Zen, a mind free from the clutter of preconceptions, fresh and receptive as a clean page. It is not ignorance. It is a profound, intentional humility before the vastness of what is. The mind that knows has stopped looking. The mind that does not know is alive with curiosity, with wonder, with the possibility of true seeing. Sudden awakening often arrives when the thinking mind exhausts its repertoire of answers and, in that moment of sincere humility, falls silent. In that silence, a different kind of knowing arises, direct, intuitive, wordless. Modern science, at its cutting edge, consistently meets this same mystery. Physicists probe the quantum realm and find particles that exist in probability clouds, entities that are both wave and particle depending on observation. Cosmologists map the universe and discover that over 95% of it is made of dark matter and dark energy, substances we cannot see or understand. The pinnacle of human knowledge honestly confesses, we do not know. This is not a failure. It is an honest encounter with reality. The spiritual path invites the same honest encounter with the nature of our own consciousness. In Cambridge, Professor Alastair Thorne was a giant in the field of linguistics. He spoke 12 languages and had devoted his career to decoding dead ones, believing that if he could map every human concept onto every language, he could unlock the universal structure of human thought. His identity was the decoder, the man who could make the unknown known. On a sabbatical in a remote village in the Himalayas, he was attempting to document a dying dialect spoken by only a handful of elders. He sat with the oldest woman, Norbu, recording words. He pointed to his chest. Heart, he said in English, then in Tibetan. She gave him the local word. He pointed to the sky. Sky. She gave another word. Then, he pointed to the space between them, to the quality of silence in the room, to the feeling of mutual presence. What is this word? He asked through his translator. Norbu listened to the translation, then looked at him for a long time. She spoke a fluid, melodic phrase. The translator struggled. She says, there is no single word. She says it means. The shared breath that knows it is shared before any word is spoken. It is the knowing in the space. It is not a thing to point to. Alistair was fascinated. He asked her to use it in a sentence. She simply smiled, placed her hand over her own heart, then gestured to his, and said the phrase. No subject, no object. Just the phrase hanging in the air, describing the relationship itself. He spent weeks trying to fit this concept into his linguistic frameworks. It resisted all categorization. It was a word that pointed not to an object, but to the aware field in which all objects arose. It was language pointing to its own source. In his frustration, his analytical mind finally short-circuited. Sitting in his hut one evening, he gave up. He stopped trying to decode and simply remembered the feeling in the room when Norbu had spoken, the palpable, peaceful intimacy. In that surrender, he had his insight. All his life, he had been studying the ripples on the surface of the water, thinking that if he catalogued every ripple, he would understand the ocean. But Norbu's untranslatable word was about the water itself, the silent, depthless medium. His expertise had been a barrier to experiencing the medium. He returned to Cambridge a changed man. His lectures became less about definitive structures and more about the mystery that language emerges from and points back to. He became known not just as a decoder, but as a poet of the unsayable. His awakening was the humility to admit that the most important things are, ultimately, unknowable to the conceptual mind, and can only be lived. In the mountains of North Carolina, a man named Eli was a cabinetmaker of legendary skill. He could dovetail a joint so tight you couldn't slide a hair into the seam. He knew every rule of grain, proportion, and joinery. His students would watch him work as if watching a perfect machine. One day, a young apprentice, eager to impress, presented a small jewelry box he had made. Eli inspected it. The craftsmanship was exquisite, except for one corner. In a moment of distraction, the apprentice had used a biscuit joint where a mortise antenon was called for by tradition. It was strong, but it was wrong. The apprentice waited for the critique. Eli ran his finger over the flawed corner. He was silent for a full minute. Then he said, "Tell me why you did this." Flustered, the apprentice confessed his error. "I wasn't thinking. I just did it. It felt right in the moment." Eli kept staring at the joint. "This," he said slowly, "is the most interesting part of the whole box." He looked up at his bewildered student. "You see, for 50 years, I have been making joints according to what I know. This joint was made from what you didn't know. You had a gap, and your hands, without the interference of your knowing mind, found a solution. It's alive. The rest of the box is perfect, but it's dead perfect. This corner has a question in it." From that day, Eli changed how he taught. He began giving students impossible problems on purpose, wood with wild grain, mismatched pieces. He wanted them to fail, to reach the end of their knowing, so that something more intelligent than knowledge could emerge from their hands. His own work loosened, became more expressive, more surprising. He had realized that true mastery isn't the accumulation of correct answers, it's the capacity to dwell creatively in the space of the question, to let the material and the moment guide you beyond what you already know. His not knowing became the crack where the light of originality could finally enter. Bring this teaching into your own mind right now. Notice the thoughts, opinions, and certainties that flow through. See them as content, the known. Now, become aware of the space in which these thoughts appear. This aware space itself is unknown. You cannot think about it, define it, or capture it. You can only be it. Rest your attention gently in this open, unknowing space that is prior to all your thoughts. Feel its vastness, its peace, its intelligence that is not based on information. This is beginner's mind. This is the mind that is ready to see everything as if for the first time. In this space, the next thought, when it arises, will be fresh. The next sensation will be vivid. This is the practice of not knowing, to habitually return from the content of thought to the context of aware space. It is in this context that sudden awakening blossoms. Let your awareness settle like a gentle pendulum coming to rest at center. We've touched on profound moments of seeing, in nature, in not knowing, in the body. But here is a truth that is both humbling and freeing. Awakening is not a trophy you win and place on a shelf. It is not a permanent state you achieve and then inhabit forever. To be human is to forget. The clouds of habit, thought, and emotion will inevitably obscure the clear sky of awareness. The real practice, therefore, is not about preventing the clouds, but about the gentle, persistent rhythm of return. This teaching is about awakening as a verb, not a noun. It's the understanding that clarity must be renewed in each fresh moment. The Buddha, after his great enlightenment, continued to practice for 45 years. He didn't coast. He showed up, moment by moment. This is the great democratization of enlightenment. You don't need a single, earth-shattering experience to validate your path. Your path is made of countless small awakenings. Each time you notice you've been lost in thought and gently come back to the breath, each time you meet irritation with awareness instead of reaction, each time you choose presence over distraction. Each return is a miniature enlightenment. In neuroscience, this relates to neuroplasticity and the strengthening of the brain's salience network, which helps redirect attention from default wandering to present moment focus. Every time you consciously return from distraction, you are not failing, you are doing a repetition, like a muscle lift, that physically strengthens your capacity for presence. The path isn't linear, it's a spiral. You keep circling back to the same core lesson, come back to now, but from a place of slightly deeper understanding each time. In the Arashiyama district of Kyoto, an elderly man named Kenji swept the paths of a famous bamboo grove. Every day, without fail, he would sweep the winding walkways clean of fallen leaves and tourist litter. And every day, without fail, the wind would blow, or a visitor would drop a wrapper, or more leaves would fall. A Western seeker, on a prolonged Zen retreat, watched Kenji for weeks. He saw the relentless, repetitive work and finally approached him, seeking wisdom. "Master," he said, though Kenji was no master, just a municipal employee, how do you maintain your equanimity? You clean, and it becomes dirty. You clean again. It seems so futile. Kenji paused, leaning on his broom. He looked not at the seeker, but at a single ginkgo leaf twirling down to land on the freshly swept stones. A slight smile touched his lips. "It is not about making it clean," he said. "It is about the sweeping." He bent, picked up the new leaf, and placed it in his cart. "Each time I see the leaf on the ground, I return. That is all. The path is always here. My job is to return to it, not to finish it." The seeker was stunned by the simplicity. Kenji's entire life was a metaphor for the practice. The mind is the path. Thoughts and distractions are the endless leaves. Our practice is not to achieve a permanently clear mind, an impossibility, but to cultivate the willingness to pick up the broom again and again, without resentment or expectation. Kenji's enlightenment was in his unwavering, peaceful return to the simple duty of the moment. His life was a lived mantra of mindfulness. In a seaside town in Maine, retired Admiral James Harrington spent his days in a shed behind his house, building an impossibly detailed, scale model of a 19th-century clipper ship. The project had taken him 7 years. He was a man of discipline, accustomed to command and completion. One afternoon, as he was applying the final, microscopic stitches to a miniature sail, his hand slipped. A drop of glue fell from his tweezers, landing squarely on the meticulously painted deck, ruining a full month's work. A wave of pure rage, the old fury of a man whose orders were never disobeyed, surged through him. His fist clenched. He was about to bring it down on the delicate model, to smash the whole thing to splinters in his frustration. But in that suspended moment between impulse and action, he saw his own clenched hand. He saw it as if from a distance. And he remembered an old lesson from his toughest command: in a storm in the South China Sea, you cannot control the wave, you can only adjust the rudder. He didn't smash the ship. He put the tweezers down. He walked out of the shed, down to the actual sea, and sat on the dock, watching the real waves come in and go out, one after another, endless. When he returned an hour later, the fury was gone. There was only the glue stain and the work to be done. He didn't curse the mistake. He began the patient, humble work of repairing it. Sanding, repainting, restitching. It took another month. That moment on the dock was his return. Not a grand awakening, but a crucial one. He realized his spiritual practice was right here, in the shed. It wasn't about building a perfect model, it was about meeting each moment, especially the moments of failure, with presence instead of reaction. The model, when finally finished, was not perfect. It bore the faint scar of the repaired stain. But to James, it was his masterpiece, not for its craftsmanship, but for the quiet victory it represented, the victory of return over rage, of patience over perfectionism. He had learned to command his inner navy. Feel the truth of this in your own experience. You will forget. Your mind will wander from this listening 100 times before we finish. This is not a problem. It is the condition of the practice. The magic is not in never leaving, but in the love and lack of judgment with which you return. Each return is a homecoming. So right now, notice, has your attention drifted into planning, memory, or analysis? Wonderful. You've noticed. That noticing itself is the awakening. Now, gently, without any scolding, guide your attention back to the sound of these words, or to the feeling of your breath. That gentle guiding is the most important action you will ever take. It is the rhythm of the path itself. Honor it. Let's take a breath together, a deep and settling breath. We've journeyed through stories of sudden insight, of meeting truth in nature, in silence, in limitation. But a critical question remains: what happens after? After the vision fades, after the retreat ends, after you close this recording and stand up? This is the teaching of integration. The often unglamorous, essential work of weaving awakening into the fabric of your daily, ordinary life. For awakening that stays as a memory of a peak experience is like a beautiful seed kept in a drawer. Its purpose is to be planted in the soil of your everyday existence, to grow there, and to bear fruit in your actions. True awakening isn't measured by the light of the vision, but by the warmth it brings to your ordinary moments. It's about how you speak to the barista when you're in a hurry. It's about the patience you find when technology fails. It's about the quality of attention you bring to folding laundry or commuting in traffic. The Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, captures this perfectly. The activities are the same. The difference is in the one who performs them. No longer a separate self burdened by the task, but presence itself, dancing with the form of the activity. Psychologists call this lived values or embodied cognition. It's the idea that wisdom isn't real until it moves from your beliefs into your behaviors, until it literally shapes how you move through the world. Integration is the process of letting the insight seep from your head into your hands, your speech, your reactions. It's where spirituality gets its hands dirty, and that's where it becomes real. Michael was the hard-charging CEO of a burgeoning tech company in Austin. After a severe burnout, he attended a silent mindfulness retreat, almost as a last resort. On the final day, during a walking meditation, he had a profound, spacious experience of interconnectedness. Tears streamed down his face. He felt he had touched truth. He returned to the office on Monday, determined to bring this enlightenment to his company. He called an all-hands meeting and gave an impassioned speech about presence, compassion, and the illusion of separation. His employees listened politely, confused. Later that day, rushing to an investor call, Michael spilled a large coffee all over the spotless lobby floor. He cursed under his breath, looked around for someone to clean it up, and saw the nightly janitor, an older Hispanic man named Carlos, arriving for his shift. The old impatience flared. This is a disaster. I'm late. Where is a towel? But then, he remembered the feeling from the retreat, the interconnectedness. The coffee on the floor wasn't separate from him. Carlos wasn't separate from him. The disaster was just an event. He took a breath. Instead of shouting for help, he walked to Carlos's supply closet, took a mop and bucket, and began cleaning the spill himself. Carlos, startled, rushed over. "Sir, I can do that." Michael looked up. "Carlos, I made the mess. It's only right." As he mopped, he asked Carlos about his family. He learned Carlos had been cleaning this building for 20 years, through 3 different CEOs. He had a daughter in medical school. When Michael finished, he wasn't late. He was grounded. That small, integrated action, mopping the floor without ego, did more for the company culture than his speech ever could. The story spread like wildfire. Michael hadn't just had an awakening, he had lived it in the most mundane way possible. From that day, his leadership became less about grand visions and more about authentic, present engagement. He learned that integration meant letting the insight change not what he did, but how he was while doing it. Sister Anya, a nun in a contemplative order, was also the unlikely keeper of the monastery's website. It was a humble site, listing retreat times and displaying pictures of the garden. One evening, trying to update a page, she accidentally deleted the entire hosting account. The website, the monastery's main link to the outside world, vanished. Panic gripped her. She was not a tech expert. The thought of telling the abbess was mortifying. For an hour, she frantically clicked, typed, searched forums, her breath shallow, her heart racing. She was in full problem mode, the self who fails, the self who must fix. Then, the bell for Vespers rang. The sound cut through her panic like a knife. It was a call back, not to God in some abstract sense, but to the present moment, to the practice. She stopped. She closed her eyes and took 3 breaths, feeling the fear in her chest as a physical sensation, not a catastrophe. She went to Vespers. She sang the Psalms, not thinking about the website, but when she did think of it, she held the thought lightly. After the service, she walked to the abbess's study. "Mother," she said, "I have made a mistake. I broke the website. I don't know how to fix it, but I will find help tomorrow." The abbess simply nodded. "Thank you for telling me, sister. The website is not our peace. Our peace is here." She gestured to the quiet room. The next day, Sister Anya called a tech-savvy volunteer. The site was restored in an hour. The integration was not in fixing the problem flawlessly. It was in how she met the experience of having caused a problem. She moved from panic and identification, "I am a failure," to present moment responsibility and acceptance, "A mistake has happened, and I will address it." Her practice didn't prevent the error, it allowed her to navigate it without losing her center. For her, awakening was integrated every time the bell rang, calling her from the story in her head back to the reality of her breath, her community, and the next right action. This is your invitation to integration. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Think of one small, routine task you'll do later today, making a meal, answering an email, driving home. Make a silent commitment to do that one thing with complete, undivided attention. Let it be your integration practice. Feel the textures, see the colors, be fully there. When you inevitably forget and get lost in thought, simply return, without judgment. This is how awakening moves from a concept in a podcast to a lived reality in your kitchen, your office, your car. This is how you water the seed. Let your awareness become still and deep, like water in a well. We've spoken of integrating light into daily life. But what of the parts of ourselves we try to leave in the dark? The jealousy, the anger, the pettiness, the fear, the so-called shadow aspects we deem unspiritual. We often approach awakening as a project of becoming only light, only loving, only peaceful. But this is a subtle form of violence against our wholeness. True awakening doesn't exclude the shadow, it includes it with compassionate awareness. It recognizes that the rejected parts of ourselves hold immense energy and, when brought into the light of conscious attention, become unexpected allies on the path. This teaching is about wholeness over perfection. The spiritual seeker who denies their anger is not more awake, they are simply a sleeping person pretending to be nice. Awakening happens when we stop running from the uncomfortable textures of our own being and instead turn toward them with curiosity. That knot of anxiety in your stomach, that flash of resentment, these are not obstacles to your peace. They are the very gatekeepers. When you fully feel them without adding a story of, "This shouldn't be here," something alchemical occurs. The resisted emotion, met with open awareness, often transforms or dissolves, revealing the pure energy that was trapped within it. Carl Jung, who coined the term, the shadow, taught that integration of the shadow is essential for individuation, becoming a whole person. Neuroscience shows that affect labeling, simply naming an emotion with gentle attention, calms the amygdala, the brain's fear center. By bringing mindful awareness to our difficult emotions, we don't get rid of them. We change our relationship to them. We stop being possessed by them and start being with them. In that shift, they lose their destructive power and can even reveal their hidden purpose. Maya was a lifelong peace activist. She led marches, organized sit-ins, and taught nonviolent communication. Her identity was built on being a loving, calm force in a violent world. She prided herself on having transcended anger. Then, her teenage son was severely bullied at school. The school administration did nothing. One night, finding her son crying in his room, a white-hot, volcanic rage erupted in Maya. It was pure, primal. A vivid, shocking fantasy flashed in her mind, confronting the bully's father, screaming, even physical violence. She was horrified by herself. "I am a fraud," she thought. "My peace was just a performance. I am just as violent as anyone." For days, she avoided her activism work, shrouded in shame. Finally, she confessed to her meditation teacher, expecting to be stripped of her spiritual credentials. The teacher listened and said, "The rage is not the problem. Your hatred of the rage is the war. Sit with it. Don't be it, but don't push it away. Let it be there, and find out what it is made of." Trembling, Maya did. In a quiet room, she let the rage be present. She felt its heat in her chest, its tightness in her jaw. She didn't act on it or condemn it. She just witnessed it. And beneath the fiery sensation, she touched something else, a vast, bottomless grief. Grief for her son's pain, grief for the bully's unhappiness, grief for a world where children hurt each other. The rage was just the intense, protective surface of an ocean of love and sorrow. When she fully touched the grief, the rage softened into a fierce, clear compassion. She went to the school again, not with activist platitudes, but with the grounded, powerful energy of a mother protecting her cub. She spoke with a clarity and authority that finally moved the administration to act. Her activism after that was different, more powerful, more authentic, less sanctimonious. She had integrated her shadow. Her capacity for peace now included and understood the raw energy of protection and justice. She wasn't just peaceful, she was whole. In a silent Thai forest monastery, a young Western monk named Thomas was struggling. He had come seeking pristine peace, to transcend the gross, material world. He was doing well with his mind, but his body rebelled: mosquitoes, heat, hard floors. The final test came at dawn. As he reached for the communal sugar bowl to sweeten his tea, he saw it, a large, glossy cockroach sitting right in the center of the white crystals. A wave of visceral disgust and revulsion convulsed through him. His hand jerked back. His mind screamed, "Filthy! Disgusting! Get it out!" He looked around. The other monks, including the serene old abbot, continued calmly spooning sugar from around the insect, as if it were a stone in a river. No disgust, no reaction. Thomas was mortified. His spiritual ideal was shattered by a bug. He spent the morning in turmoil, judging himself for his impurity. At the midday walk, he confessed his failure to the abbot. The old man smiled. "You think the awakened mind has no disgust? It has disgust. It has every human feeling. The difference is, it does not believe the story that comes with it. You saw the roach and thought, 'This is wrong. I am wrong for feeling this.' We saw the roach and thought, 'Ah, a roach is in the sugar.' We moved it gently with a leaf and washed our hands. The feeling arose and passed. No war." He pointed to a magnificent, decaying log, swarming with insects and fungi. "Is that log pure or impure? It is both. It is life and death feeding life. Your disgust is part of the whole thing. When you stop fighting it, you see it is just another color in the painting. Not good, not bad. Just color." That afternoon, Thomas went to the sugar bowl. The roach was gone, but his memory of the disgust was there. This time, he felt the disgust as a sensation, a tightening in his gut. He watched it. He didn't add the story, "I am a bad monk." He just felt the tightness. And like a wave, it arose, peaked, and dissolved. In its place was a simple, clean perception: sugar in a bowl. He spooned it. He had not eliminated his shadow, he had made peace with it. His awakening was the end of the civil war between his spiritual ideal and his human reality. Bring this into your own heart. Right now, is there a subtle feeling you've been pushing away? A tinge of anxiety, a whisper of sadness, a flicker of irritation? Instead of trying to fix it or make it spiritual, try this. Turn your attention toward it with gentle curiosity. Where do you feel it in your body? What is its texture, temperature, shape? Don't analyze it. Just be with the raw sensation, as you would watch a cloud drift across the sky. Notice what happens. Often, the simple, non-judgmental attention is the alchemy that transforms the shadow from a monster in the closet into just another part of the room. This is how we become whole. Not by achieving perfect light, but by allowing all the colors of our being to exist in the compassionate space of awareness. Let your awareness become fluid, like a river that knows both motion and depth. We often associate awakening with stillness, the serene meditator, the silent mountain. But what of the dancer mid-leap, the surgeon in focused operation, the athlete in flow? Awakening is not only found in the cessation of movement, it can be the very essence of movement itself, when action arises from a still center. This is the teaching of awakening in dynamic equilibrium. Discovering the unmoving witness within the whirl of life. We live in a world that demands action. To suggest that peace is only found in withdrawal is to create a painful split. The mature awakening is one that can remain undisturbed while fully engaged. It's the difference between being swept away by a rushing river and being the riverbed, solid, unmoved, yet enabling the water's flow. In action that comes from this place, there is no separate doer straining to achieve. There is simply the intelligent unfolding of life through this particular form, with clarity, efficiency, and grace. This state is known in psychology as flow or being in the zone, where self-consciousness vanishes, time distorts, and action feels effortless. Athletes, artists, and performers describe it. While not identical to spiritual awakening, flow is its close cousin, a temporary experiential union of actor and action. Awakening makes this state more accessible and fundamental, not as a rare peak experience, but as the ground from which all action can spring. In a busy hospital in Cape Town, Dr. Thandwi was performing a high-risk, emergency bypass surgery. A young man's heart was failing on the table. The atmosphere was tense, monitors beeped urgently, nurses moved with sharp efficiency. Thandwi's hands, however, moved with a paradoxical quality. Supremely quick and precise, yet utterly calm, almost slow in their certainty. A medical student observing later remarked it was like watching a sacred dance. There was no hesitation, no frantic energy. At one critical moment, a tiny artery tore. A spurt of blood obscured the field. The student gasped. Thandwi didn't flinch. His voice, calm and clear through his mask, directed a nurse to adjust the suction. His own hands, without a tremor, placed a precise clamp. The crisis was averted in seconds. After the successful surgery, the student, awestruck, asked him, "How do you not panic? The pressure, the life in your hands." Thandwi, washing up, considered the question. Early in my career, I would panic, he said. I was the doer, and the stakes were terrifying. Then I learned something. In that theater, I am not there. He saw the students' confusion and smiled. My training, my knowledge, my hands are there. But the fearful me, the one worrying about reputation or failure, must be absolutely absent. There is only the problem and the response. The stillness is not in the room, it is here. He tapped his own chest. When that stillness is present, the hands know what to do. They are not my hands. They are the hands of life, fixing itself. For Thandwi, the operating theater was his meditation hall. His awakening was the ability to disappear into total, selfless service, where the action was so pure it left no trace of a separate actor. The high-stakes drama of surgery became the perfect condition to force that total presence. His stillness was not passive, it was the source of his flawless, compassionate action. In the chaotic, neon-drenched streets of Tokyo, a bike messenger named Ren wove through traffic with what seemed like suicidal fearlessness. Tourists would watch, hearts in throats, as he slipped between buses and taxis with inches to spare. But if you could see his face, you'd see not fear or aggression, but a look of serene focus. Ren wasn't reckless, he was in a state of hyper-present flow. He described it like this: the city is not an obstacle course. It is a living body. I am not moving through it, I am moving with it. The taxi's turn signal, the pedestrian's glance, the rhythm of the traffic lights, it's all one pattern. My job is to feel the pattern and place myself where the space opens. I don't decide, I see the opening and I am already there. One day, an elderly tourist stepped off a curb without looking. Ren saw it unfold not as a disaster, but as the next movement in the pattern. He didn't brake hard and fly over his handlebars. He turned his front wheel slightly, leaned his body, and let his bike slide sideways in a controlled skid, coming to a stop a hand's breadth from the shocked tourist. He put a foot down, nodded to the man, and pushed off again, his rhythm unbroken. For Ren, his entire workday was a moving meditation. The constant danger forced a total surrender of the thinking, worrying mind. There was only perception and response, with no gap in between. In that gapless state, he found an exhilarating peace. He wasn't seeking awakening, he had found it in the full-throttle engagement with life, in the absolute trust of his own embodied intelligence. His stillness was the eye of his own hurricane. Bring this understanding into your own body. You may not be performing surgery or weaving through Tokyo traffic, but you are always in motion, breathing, thinking, perhaps tapping a foot. Can you feel the stillness within that motion? Try this, clench your fist tightly. Feel the tension, the movement. Now, relax it completely. Feel the stillness. Now, move your hand gently, opening and closing it, but maintain an inner awareness of the still, silent space from which the movement arises. That still space is always here, whether you are sitting absolutely still or running for a bus. The practice is to anchor in that inner stillness, and let your actions flow from it, like gestures from a calm center. This is how you carry the temple with you into the marketplace. The world needs not more people who are only still, but people whose actions are rooted in stillness. Let your awareness become as light as a dandelion seed, ready to release what no longer serves. We've explored how awakening can be found in action, in shadow, in integration. But at its core, sudden awakening is often less about learning something new and more about unlearning, shedding the accumulated layers of assumption, belief, and identity that have obscured your true nature. It is not an addition to yourself, but a subtraction. A clearing away. Like wiping fog from a mirror to reveal the reflection that was always there. We spend our lives building a complex structure called me. This structure is made of stories. I am this personality type, I come from this kind of family, I believe these things, I am good at this but bad at that. We take these stories to be solid, real, and definitive. Awakening occurs when you have a direct experience that reveals these stories to be transparent, insubstantial, like noticing that the scarecrow in the field is not a person, just sticks and cloth arranged in a convincing pattern. The realization is not, I am someone else, but I was never that someone I thought I was to begin with. This unlearning is not an intellectual dismissal. It is a visceral, often disorienting, falling away. The 13th century mystic Meister Eckhart called it, letting go of God for the sake of God, releasing even our most cherished concepts of truth to meet truth itself. In modern terms, it's a profound cognitive and perceptual shift where the brain's default mode network, the narrator of the me story, temporarily quiets, allowing a more direct perception of reality. Story, the linguist and the empty dictionary. Professor Illara was a semanticist at Oxford, specializing in how words create meaning. Her life's work was mapping the intricate web of language. She believed, fundamentally, that we are the stories we tell, that the self is a narrative construct. She was brilliant, but carried a quiet despair. If the self is just a story, then what is real? During a sabbatical in the remote Scottish Highlands, a severe storm knocked out power for a week. Isolated in a cottage with only candles and her own thoughts, she found herself without her usual tools, no internet, no vast library, no way to research her experience. For days, she was bored, then restless, then deeply anxious as the inner narration of her identity, the academic, the thinker, had nothing to attach to. On the 5th night, sitting by the fire, she watched the flames consume a log. As it crackled and broke apart, a phrase from her own research surfaced. The map is not the territory. And in that moment, watching the elemental fire, it ceased to be an intellectual concept. It became her reality. She saw, with shocking clarity, that her entire identity was a map, a fantastically detailed, convincing map, but the territory of her actual, present moment existence was this: the heat on her skin, the smell of wood smoke, the sound of wind, the simple sense of being aware. The map, the story of Illara, had completely obscured the territory. It was a profound unlearning. She didn't gain new knowledge, she lost an old, fundamental assumption. The self she had spent a lifetime analyzing was seen to be a useful, but ultimately fictional, overlay. When power returned, she went back to Oxford, but her work changed. She began studying moments when language fails, in awe, in trauma, in love, and the pure, wordless being that remains. Her colleagues found her work mystical, but her students flocked to her. She taught that before you study the story, you must know the silence from which it arises. She had unlearned her primary thesis to discover a deeper truth. In a rural studio in North Carolina, a potter named Samuel was known for his memory vases. He would interview a person about a pivotal life moment, then craft a vase whose form, texture, and glaze embodied that memory. They were breathtakingly evocative. People would look at their vase and feel their own story reflected back at them. A woman commissioned a vase for the memory of her mother's final, forgiving words. Samuel worked for a month, creating a piece of extraordinary tenderness, tall, with a slight lean, glazed in soft greens and blues that seemed to hold light like a gentle breath. As he carried the finished, unfired vase to the kiln, his foot caught on a wire. He stumbled. The vase flew from his hands and shattered on the concrete floor into 100 pieces. He stood frozen. Not just at the financial loss or the ruined work, but at the violent destruction of a story, a memory given form. He sank to the floor amidst the shards, not to clean up, but to truly look. He saw the clay, now returned to its separate state. He saw the glaze as colored dust. The form that held the memory was gone. And yet, the quiet of the studio remained. The feeling of the woman's story in his heart remained. The memory itself had not been in the clay. The meaning had not shattered. It had just been released from its temporary container. In that moment, he unlearned the core belief of his artistry, that meaning resides in the object. He saw that the object is just a temporary focal point for the meaning, which is always and already present in awareness itself. He gathered the shards, not to rebuild the old vase, but to create a mosaic for the woman, embedding the pieces in mortar. The new piece was even more powerful, a story not of perfect form, but of fragility, breakage, and reassembly. It told a deeper truth. Samuel had unlearned perfection and discovered wholeness in a new way. Try this gentle unlearning now. Ask yourself silently, what am I sure of about myself? Perhaps I am a kind person, or I am an anxious person. Hold that belief lightly. Now, feel into the present moment. Feel the aliveness in your hands, the sound in the room, the space around you. Can you find the kind person or the anxious person in this direct experience? Or are those just labels, stories that float through the open space of awareness? You don't need to reject the stories. Just see them as stories, not as truth. This seeing is the beginning of unlearning. It creates a space between you and your self-concepts. In that space, freedom breathes. Let your awareness settle into the spaces between the words. We've spoken of stories, unlearning, and action. Now, let us venture into the most direct teacher of all, silence. Not the mere absence of sound, but a living, palpable presence, a communion that exists when the mind's commentary ceases. In our world of constant noise and mental chatter, we often overlook silence as emptiness. But in the wisdom traditions, silence is recognized as the womb of all understanding, the ground from which truth emerges and to which it returns. Awakening in silence is not about achieving a blank mind. It is about discovering the aware, intelligent space that is already silent, even amidst noise. It's the difference between listening to the notes of a song and hearing the silence that holds the notes. When you rest in this fundamental silence, you are not separate from what you perceive. You become the listening itself. In that state, insights don't arrive as thoughts, they dawn as direct knowing, as clarity that feels remembered rather than learned. Science is beginning to explore the effects of deep silence. Studies have shown that periods of silence can stimulate brain growth in the hippocampus, related to memory and emotion, and reduce stress hormones more effectively than relaxing music. But beyond the physiology, there is a metaphysics of silence. It is the common denominator of all experience, the blank screen upon which the movie of life plays. To awaken to silence is to recognize yourself as that screen, unchanging and untouched by the drama. In the deepest vault of the Vatican Apostolic Archive, an old archivist named Brother Giovanni spent his days amongst millions of documents, papal decrees, ancient letters, historical accounts. His world was one of words, of meaning extracted from faded ink. He was a keeper of recorded truth. He developed a strange, persistent tinnitus. A high-pitched ringing in his ears that no doctor could cure. At first, it was torture, a constant noise obscuring the precious quiet of the archives. He fought it, despairing that his world of silent study was ruined. One desperate night, unable to sleep, he sat in his cell and did the only thing left: he stopped fighting. He turned his attention directly toward the ringing, not as a problem, but as a sound. He listened to it with utter focus, as he would examine a medieval manuscript. And as he listened, a subtle shift occurred. The ringing didn't change, but his relationship to it did. It was no longer an interruption to silence. It became a sound appearing within a vast, inner silence. The more he listened, the more the sound seemed to be made of the silence itself, a vibration of the quiet. In that realization, the boundary between sound and silence dissolved. The tinnitus became his guru. His entire perception flipped. He no longer worked in a silent archive disturbed by noise. He worked in an endless field of silence, within which both the ancient texts and the ringing in his ears arose like temporary patterns. The words on the parchment no longer held just historical meaning, they appeared to him as beautiful, intricate formations emerging from and returning to the great silence that held all things. He became known for the profound, peaceful presence he brought to researchers. He had discovered that the ultimate archive, the source of all documents, is silence itself. On a storm-lashed rock off the coast of Iceland, an old lighthouse keeper named Halder was spending his final winter before retirement. For 30 years, his companions had been the wind, the crash of waves, and the periodic groan of the lantern mechanism turning. He was a man of few words, his personality worn smooth by solitude and elemental forces. A young relief keeper, arriving for a 2-week stint, was a talkative city dweller. He filled the small living quarters with chatter about politics, technology, his personal life. Halder listened, nodding, but said little. After 3 days, the younger man grew frustrated. "Don't you get lonely out here? Don't you have anything to say?" Halder stirred his coffee. "I have the conversation," he said. "What conversation?" Halder gestured to the window, where a gale was hurling rain against the thick glass. "That one. It has been talking for 30 years. I have learned its language." He paused. "Your words are like the waves. They come and go. Interesting shapes. But the ocean beneath them, that is the same. That is what I am listening to." That night, during a lull in the storm, Halder took the young man outside. The sky had cleared, revealing a breathtaking aurora borealis. Silent, rippling veils of green and violet. They stood in the cold, wordless. The young man's mental chatter ceased, swallowed by the magnificence. In that shared silence, he felt something he had never felt in the city, a profound, peaceful connection, to the sky, to the old man beside him, to himself. No words were needed. The silence was the connection. Halder hadn't just endured solitude, he had married it. His awakening was his seamless communion with the nonverbal intelligence of sea, sky, and stone. He didn't need to speak of presence, he was presence, a human shaped by silence. The young man left 2 weeks later, transformed. He hadn't learned a philosophy from Halder, he had absorbed a state of being. He realized that the most important conversations happen not in words, but in the shared silence that words attempt, and fail, to describe. You can touch this communion now. As you listen, notice not just the words, but the silence that surrounds them. Notice the pause at the end of a sentence. In that pause, don't rush to think. Simply rest there. Now, expand that listening. Become aware of the background silence in your environment, the hum of appliances, distant traffic, or the pure quiet of the night. Listen to that silence not as an absence, but as a presence. Feel how it holds all the sounds. Now, turn that listening inward. Can you sense the silent awareness behind your own thoughts? That is your essential nature. It is not produced by meditation, it is what is left when mental activity settles. It is the common ground of all our experiences. Rest is that silent awareness. In this communion, there is no seeker and nothing sought. There is only this. And this is enough. Let your awareness soften completely, like butter left in the sun. We have journeyed through stories of effort, surrender, shadow, and silence. Now we arrive at the simplest, yet most elusive, of all teachings, the end of seeking itself. This is the ultimate paradox. Everything we've explored has been a finger pointing, but the moon is not in the finger. Awakening is not something you find at the end of a long search. It is the recognition that what you have been seeking is, and has always been, the one who is seeking. It is the profound, often humorous, realization that you are already home. You've just been reading the map upside down. We are conditioned to be seekers. We seek happiness, peace, love, enlightenment. This seeking implies a lack, a distance between here, where I am, which is not good enough, and there, where the goal is. The entire spiritual industry is built on this gap. But what if peace is not a destination, but the very ground you're standing on, obscured only by the frantic activity of seeking? What if the peace you want is the same awareness that is reading these words right now, but overlooked because it's too close, too simple, too obvious? This teaching points to recognition, not acquisition. It's like searching everywhere for your glasses only to find they've been on your head the whole time. The shift is not in gaining something new, but in stopping the activity that obscures what's already fully present. The seeker's exhaustion is often the final prerequisite. When you are too tired to seek another teacher, read another book, or try another technique, you collapse into the present moment, and find it was the treasure all along. Dr. Eris Thorne, no relation to the earlier linguist, was an anthropologist obsessed with finding a rumored, uncontacted tribe deep in the Amazon, said to possess pure, uncorrupted wisdom. He believed that with them, he would finally understand the essence of human peace. For years, he mounted expeditions. He endured malaria, hostile wildlife, and bureaucratic nightmares. He found traces, abandoned camps, old footpaths, but never the tribe. On his final expedition, funding exhausted and his health failing, he became hopelessly lost. His guides abandoned him. For days, he stumbled through the green hell, delirious with fever, his quest finally revealed as a ridiculous fantasy. He collapsed at the base of a giant kapok tree, ready to die. He woke to the feeling of cool water on his lips. An old indigenous man from a different, known tribe was tending to him. This man's people had been watching the foolish outsider for years. As Eris recovered in their village, he expected profound secrets. Instead, he found ordinary life. Children playing, women weaving, men fishing. They shared food with him, laughed at his clumsy attempts to help, and showed him which plants healed fever. One evening, sitting by the fire, Eris asked the old man, through gestures and broken vocabulary, about the secret of his people's contentment. The old man looked puzzled. He pointed to the fire, to the stars, to the people, to Eris himself, and then made a sweeping gesture that took in the whole scene. He said one word in his language, which Eris later learned meant, essentially, this. Eris's fever break had not just been physical. In his collapse, the seeker had died. He was no longer an anthropologist studying life, he was simply in life, being cared for, being part of the circle. The wisdom he had crossed continents to find was not a set of teachings. It was the direct, unmediated experience of belonging, of being this. He returned home not with notebooks of secrets, but with a quiet heart. He became a different kind of teacher, telling students, don't go looking for wisdom in distant jungles. Clean the jungle from your own eyes, and see that you are already sitting in the middle of it. In Ravenna, Italy, famed for its ancient Byzantine mosaics, an artist named Julia was restoring a damaged 6th century mural of a saint. The work was painstaking, matching tiny colored tiles, or tesserae, to fill gaps. Near the saint's eye, one specific tile, a unique shade of gold green, was missing. The original pigment was lost to history. Julia became obsessed. She traveled to Turkey, Greece, and North Africa, seeking a quarry that might yield a matching stone. She spent a fortune and 2 years on this quest. The restoration was stalled, the hole in the saint's face a glaring accusation. One rainy afternoon, dejected, she was cleaning her studio. Under a work table, buried in dust and debris, she kicked a small, forgotten box of discarded tesserae from her early training. She idly sifted through them. And there it was. The exact gold-green tile. She had possessed it all along. It had been in her studio for a decade. She sat on the floor and laughed until she cried. The frantic seeker, the international traveler, the spendthrift. All that drama for something that had never left her possession. She placed the tile. It fit perfectly. The saint's gaze was complete, and it seemed to look at her with gentle humor. For Julia, the mosaic became her koan. She saw that her entire spiritual seeking had been the same, a frantic search for a missing piece to complete herself, blinding her to the wholeness that was already, and always, present. The quest itself had been the only thing creating a sense of lack. She didn't become enlightened, she just stopped overlooking what was already there. Her art afterward was simpler, more confident. She had found the source was not in a distant quarry, but in her own willingness to see what was already in her hand. Feel the truth of this in your own being. For just a moment, stop. Stop trying to understand, to get better, to become peaceful. Simply be aware. Awareness is here. It is reading these words. It is hearing sounds. It is knowing sensations. This aware space, clear, open, present, is what you are. You are not a person who has awareness. You are awareness, experiencing the temporary movie of a person. This recognition requires no effort, no journey, no time. It only requires you to stop overlooking it in favor of some future achievement. The seeking was a dream. The awakening is to wake up and realize you are already awake. Rest in this simple, undeniable fact. You are here. And this, here, is the destination every seeker seeks. Let your awareness become fluid, like water finding its course. We've touched the still center, the end of seeking. Yet life is not static. It is a constant, graceful, sometimes chaotic flow. The final resistance to awakening is often our deep-seated fear of change, our craving for permanence. We want the good moments to last, the bad moments to end, and our sense of self to remain solid and predictable. But reality is a river. To awaken is not to find a rock to cling to in the torrent, but to realize you are the river, consciousness itself, flowing through ever-changing forms. This teaching is about awakening to impermanence, anicca in Buddhism. It is the direct, liberating insight that everything arises and passes away: sensations, thoughts, emotions, relationships, even this body. This is not a morbid truth, but the secret of life's vibrancy. The freshness of each moment comes precisely because it is new and cannot be held. Your grief over a loss is proof of a prior love, which was itself a beautiful, temporary configuration of energy. When we stop resisting the flow and instead align with it, a profound peace arises, the peace of being in harmony with reality itself, not at war with its fundamental nature. Modern physics confirms this at the most fundamental level. Quantum fields fluctuate, particles pop in and out of existence. At our macro level, our cells replace themselves entirely every 7 to 10 years. You are literally not the same physical you that you were a decade ago. What you call you is a pattern, a process, a verb masquerading as a noun. Awakening to this is to shift identity from the temporary pattern to the aware space in which all patterns dance. In a monastery in Dharamshala, India, a group of Tibetan monks undertook a sacred, month-long ritual, the creation of a Kalachakra sand mandala. Millions of grains of colored sand, painstakingly placed with metal funnels called chakpur, formed an intricate, breathtaking universe of deities and symbols. It was an act of devotion, of concentrated intention, representing the cosmos and the enlightened mind. People would travel to watch the silent, meticulous work. The atmosphere was one of hushed awe. At the end of the month, the mandala was complete, a radiant, geometric masterpiece on the temple floor. Then, in a ceremony open to the public, the monks did the unthinkable. They took ritual implements and swept the entire mandala into a pile of mixed, mundane sand. They poured the sand into a flowing river, offering it back to the world. Western observers were often horrified. All that work, destroyed in minutes. But for the monks, this was the most important part of the practice. The destruction was the teaching. The beauty was not in preserving the form, but in the non-attachment to the form. It was a visceral, public lesson in impermanence. The true mandala was not the sand, it was the focused awareness, the peaceful intention, and the act of release itself, qualities that flowed into the river and the witnesses' hearts, unchanged by form. One monk explained to a tearful visitor, "If we cling to the sand, we miss the point. The sand was always going to return to sand." Our practice was to create something beautiful with full hearts, and then to let it go with full hearts. This is how to live. This is freedom. The monk's awakening was lived daily. They didn't just believe in impermanence, they practiced it in the most dramatic way, freeing themselves from the tyranny of preserving what must, by nature, pass away. In a dimly lit club on Frenchman Street in New Orleans, a saxophonist named Elijah was a local legend. He played traditional jazz, a form built on improvisation. Night after night, he would play the same standards, "When the Saints Go Marching In," Basin Street Blues. But they were never the same. Each performance was a unique conversation between the musicians, the audience, and the moment. A technically brilliant classical musician from Juilliard came to hear him. After the set, The classical musician said, "That was incredible. Could you write down that solo you played in the middle of Saints?" The phrasing was genius. Elijah smiled, wiping his brow. "Can't do it, brother." "Why not?" "It was perfection." "Because I don't remember it," Elijah chuckled. "It wasn't something I had that I played. It was something that happened. If I tried to play it again tomorrow, it would be dead. A stuffed bird. Jazz ain't about the notes you play. It's about listening to the space between the notes right now, and letting the next one be born. It's always dying and being born. That's why it's alive." For Elijah, his art was his spiritual practice. Each performance was a meditation on impermanence and presence. He had to let go of the last phrase, no matter how beautiful, to be open to the next one. His ego as a creator had to die moment by moment so the music itself could live. He was a conduit for the flow. His awakening was in his trust of the process. He knew that the beauty was in the unrepeatable aliveness of the now, not in a preserved artifact. He didn't fear the end of a song, because he knew the silence it returned to was the same silence from which the next song would emerge. Feel the truth of impermanence in your own experience. Listen to a sound in your environment, perhaps a distant car, a hum, the wind. Notice how it arises, stays for a moment, and then fades. Your thoughts are the same. Watch one thought appear, linger, and dissolve. Your breath is the same, inhalation, pause, exhalation. You are surrounded by, and made of, this constant, gentle flow. Resistance to this flow is suffering. Alignment with it is peace. For the next few minutes, don't try to change anything. Just be the aware space that witnesses the flow. See sensations come and go. See thoughts arise and pass. See emotions swell and recede. You are not these temporary phenomena. You are the witnessing presence in which they all unfold. Like the sky that holds the weather without being damaged by it, you are the consciousness that holds all experience without being altered by its changing forms. Rest as this sky-like awareness. In this resting, you are in harmony with the fundamental law of the universe, everything changes, and the awareness that knows this change is, itself, unchanging and free. Let everything settle now, like leaves after a gentle wind. We have traveled far in our understanding, through stories of loss, effort, silence, and flow. We arrive now at the simplest, most profound destination, the sacredness of the ordinary, everyday moment. This is not an anticlimax. It is the revelation. After all the seeking, all the insights, all the extraordinary experiences, what remains? This. Just this. The feeling of your body at rest. The sound reaching your ears. The space around you. It is so simple, so obvious, that the mind, which loves complexity and drama, often overlooks it entirely. Awakening does not reveal a hidden, mystical world behind this one. It reveals this world, seen clearly for the first time, without the filter of wanting it to be different. The ordinary is not a stepping stone to the sacred, it is the sacred, appearing in its most humble, intimate, and available form. The great Zen masters did not point to the heavens, they pointed to the rice bowl, the wooden ladle, the dusty road. "What is the Buddha?" a student asks. The master replies, 3 pounds of flax. Or, the cypress tree in the courtyard. This is the final unlearning, that spiritual life is somewhere else. It is right here, in the texture of your daily life. This is where all the teachings converge. The stillness in motion. That's you washing a dish with full attention. The unlearning. That's you dropping the story that this moment is just doing chores. The end of seeking. That's you realizing the peace you want is in the feeling of warm water on your hands. The integration is complete when there is no longer a separation between your spiritual practice and taking out the trash. All of life becomes the temple, and every action becomes a form of prayer, not because you sanctify it with a special intention, but because you meet it with the sanctity of undivided presence. On the 80th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, Marco washed windows. It was a job that inspired vertigo in most, a blur of repetitive motion for others. For Marco, it was his cathedral. He would rise before dawn, strap into his harness, and step out into the sky. One morning, a young, stressed executive, working late on a failed deal, watched from inside as Marco cleaned his corner office window. He saw the man outside, suspended in air, moving his squeegee in slow, perfect arcs, a look of serene focus on his face. The contrast was jarring, the executive in his luxurious prison of anxiety, and the window washer in his dangerous perch, utterly at peace. When Marco finished the pane and prepared to move down, the executive impulsively rapped on the glass. Marco looked in, surprised. The executive mimed opening the window. With a shrug, Marco unlocked it from the outside. "How can you be so calm out there?" the executive blurted out, the city's roar flooding in. Marco leaned in. "You see the view every day, yeah," he said, his voice calm against the wind. "The view? I see spreadsheets. I see problems." Marco gestured with his chin. "Right now, the sun is hitting the East River like a path of gold. A barge is pushing through it, slow as a heartbeat. The clouds over Brooklyn are pink, like a painting you couldn't make up." He looked back at the executive. "I don't have your job. But you have my view every day, and you don't even see it. My job is to clean the window so you can see it. But the funny thing is, I'm the one who gets to really look." He gave a small smile, closed and relocked the window, and descended out of sight. The executive stood there, the words echoing. He looked out. For the first time in years, he really saw the city, not as a chessboard of ambition, but as a living, breathing, breathtaking spectacle of light and life. Marco's awakening was in his total engagement with his task, which forced him into a state of hyperpresence. He had found the sacred in the most precarious, ordinary job imaginable. He wasn't seeking beauty, he was married to it, 80 stories high. In a small house in the Italian countryside, Nonna Rosa made minestrone. She had made it every Wednesday for 60 years. There was no recipe. Her hands knew. She'd feel the firmness of a zucchini, smell the basil, taste the broth. Her grandchildren, visiting from the city with their smartphones and urgent schedules, would watch her slow, deliberate movements with a mixture of affection and impatience. "Nana, we can buy soup in a carton. It takes 2 minutes," one said. She didn't look up from chopping a carrot. "This takes a lifetime," she said softly. One afternoon, a granddaughter, a lawyer frazzled by a high-stakes case, sat at the kitchen table, silently unspooling. She watched her grandmother. She saw the way the afternoon light fell across her wrinkled hands. She heard the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the knife on the wooden board. She smelled the onion sweating in olive oil. A smell that was the very scent of her childhood, of safety, of love. In her exhaustion, her mental defenses fell. She wasn't a lawyer watching an old woman cook. She was a human being, present in a moment of profound, wordless nurturing. The simplicity of it, the transformation of raw vegetables into nourishment through patience and attention, struck her as the most meaningful thing in the world. It was a ritual of care that had sustained a family for generations. Tears filled her eyes. Nonna Rosa looked over, understood, and said nothing. She simply handed her a bunch of parsley. "Here. You chop." The granddaughter took the knife. She focused on the feel of the stems, the release of the green scent. For 20 minutes, there was no case, no stress. There was only the parsley, the knife, her grandmother's quiet presence, and the simmering pot. In that ordinary kitchen task, she found a peace deeper than any meditation app could provide. Nonna Rosa's entire life was her spirituality. Her prayer was the soup. Her temple was the kitchen. Her teaching was in her hands, offering not just food, but the embodied truth that love is an action, performed with attention, again and again. And so we come full circle. The sudden awakening we've explored isn't a distant lightning bolt. It is the quiet, continuous lightning of full attention, illuminating whatever it touches. It can strike while you're watching a sunset or while you're sorting socks. The door is not locked. It never was. You've just been waiting for a more dramatic doorknob. Your practice, should you choose one, is simply this: to meet the next moment, and the next, and the next, with this quality of open, gentle attention. Not to make it special, but to see that it already is. Let your breath be natural now. Let the stories and teachings begin to fade, like echoes in a quiet canyon. What remains is you, not the you of story and history, but the you that is pure, aware presence. This has been a journey of remembering what you never truly forgot. We spoke of the unseen ripening, and how your entire life has prepared you for this moment of recognition. We walked through doorways in ordinary tasks, met our shadows with compassion, learned from silence, and felt the flow of impermanence. We discovered that seeking ends where it begins. In the simple, undeniable fact of being aware, right here, right now. This is Monk's Temple. Not a physical place, but a space of shared listening, a sanctuary of words and silence offered to your heart. The true temple was never outside of you. It is the aware, peaceful consciousness that is reading these words. As we close, carry no burdens. You don't need to remember all the stories. You don't need to achieve a special state. Just take one gentle breath, and feel the aliveness that breathes you. That is enough. That has always been enough. Thank you for sharing this time, this space, this journey home. May the peace you've touched here ripple out into your dreams, your waking life, and into the world. You are home. You have always been home. Rest now. Sleep in peace.